Welcome to Four Calling Birds, honest conversations that give us all a voice.
May I introduce Stephen Carter Bailey, Great British Bake Off Queen and resident Agony uncle.
I really want to do my impression of a peacock.
Natalie Spence, actress and singer.
Blackbird, teach me how to sing. Him names all the birds.
Meredith Hepner Chapman, PR guru and expert at making a short story very long indeed.
And I'm not saying that you have any of those traits.
And myself, Hayley Clapham, voiceover artist. And I am your host for this week's episode. Today I'm talking to Sarah Nicholson, who has very kindly and generously shared her adoption story with us. Sarah is from the West Midlands and lives in London. She has worked in theatre for over 20 years in production and managerial roles, and now supports individuals going into senior management or leadership roles for the first time. Sarah was first placed with her family at 10 weeks old and officially adopted at 6 months. And this is Sarah's story. So here I am with the delightful Sarah Nicholson.
Hello.
And we're going to be discussing your adoption story today, Sarah. And I know this story really well because I know you really well. It's a particularly lovely story. But let's start at the beginning. You always known you were adopted.
Yes, I don't remember not knowing. I definitely thought it was the best thing ever because I imagined a room full of babies and I was picked out, selected. So yeah, I thought it was great. And I was always encouraged to think it was made me special. So I told lots of people in school and then, you find out that other kids in your class were adopted. So yeah, I don't remember not knowing.
And why did you decide to search for your birth mum? Was it something that you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, I think that I suppose there's been two really key times in my life where it's felt most significant. So firstly, approaching age 17, which was the age that my birth mum had me, I suddenly realised how young it was and what a brave decision it was. I'd always been told, that it was a selfless thing to do. And I got to 17 and I think when I was 14, I thought, yeah, but 17 is really old. And then when I hit 17, I thought, oh my God, I couldn't. And the other time I felt very adopted, which was after I'd searched, was when my friends started having children. But yeah, I think I always knew I'd do it because I didn't know any of my medical history and those questions come up. So you go to the doctor and you're asked things and you always just say, well, I'm doctor, I don't know if there's any history of this, something, the other.
Yeah.
And then I did lose my dad when I was 22 very suddenly. I told him I was going to do it. And his main concern was that it would upset my mum. But actually she's always been really supportive and understood the urge to do it. And then I lost him, so that sort of put it on hold. And then I got to 28 and I thought, well, what would I do if I searched in my 40s and my birth mum had died suddenly? I'd never forgive myself. So yeah, it just sort of felt right and I just did it.
Did you have any information about your mum before you started searching? Was there anything that you knew about her or family, or was it you didn't have any information at all?
I knew that her name was Susan, and then when I met her, I realised that no one calls her Susan. She's known as Sue. So that was felt like an auntie. I knew the address where I was born and the hospital, and I knew that she was a mother's help. That was on my original birth certificate. So I think I knew that she was a live-in sort of nanny, au pair person. That's all I really had.
And how did you start the whole process? How did you start the ball rolling?
Well, I knew about NORCAP, which sadly no longer exists now, but I joined NORCAP and before I did it, I would read the newsletters and read the stories and everything. And
NORCAP was a charity, just to clarify. NORCAP was an adoption charity.
An adoption, yes, it became known as an adoption support agency. I'm not quite sure, can't quite remember why, but yes, it was a charity, and you paid a small amount to for an intermediary to contact your birth relatives on your behalf.
Okay.
And I thought, having read Woman's Own and, other magazines with those stories and seen stuff on TV, I thought this was going to take years. I thought, well, I'll start now. I think I was 28. I'll start now. Maybe in a couple of years we'll trace her and she'll be in the outback in Australia or something.
Yeah.
So I joined NORCAP, and what you have to do is you have to send them all the information you found for yourself to sort of verify as much as you can that you believe this person is your birth relative, and they then check that. So I started by I had my original birth certificate, which my mum gave me when I was about 15, and I'd always kept it. And so I knew my birth surname. And with our other friend, Hayley, we went to the Public Records Office in Islington, and we searched. And again, we thought this would be one of maybe 15 visits. And I think in 40 minutes, we'd found her and two half brothers. And then by the time we'd finished, we'd found 4.
That's amazing. Is that unusual, do you think, to find that quite quickly? Were you just lucky, or is that?
I think I was lucky because my birth surname is unusual. I think if you're born a Smith and then you're adopted into a Jones family, you really might be taking years. It might take years. So I think I was lucky because of the surname. And I knew there was a Scottish element. So we did find a bogus brother, actually. We decided it wasn't right. He wasn't it. But because he had a Scottish middle name, we just got really hyperactive about it. So you start by looking to see whether she'd got married. And actually, she'd got married twice. And then you look up the surnames, and it's these massive books. I mean, it's quite sort of romantic and sentimental, and they're not dusty, but in my head they were. Do you know what I mean? And we found her really quickly, and then 4 half brothers.
And then NORCAP contact your birth mother on your behalf. Is that right? Do I remember that rightly?
So that's right. So they write a letter that's very. If you're a birth mother, or if you know that a relative of yours relinquished a child at birth, you will know it's a letter about that. But if you have no idea, it just looks like a family tree.
Okay.
Information, looking for information. So yes, the letter went out, and they used to allow for 4 weeks. And if you didn't hear within 4 weeks, you'd send another letter, just because not every letter reaches the recipient because of the post. And then you leave it another 4 weeks, and then you send a final letter saying, look, we've written to you, the door's always open, here's my contact details. This is from the intermediary.
Yeah.
But we were coming up to 4 weeks, and my birth mum replied.
The first 4 weeks?
The first 4 weeks. I wasn't sure I wanted to send another letter after the, look, here's the letter again in case it didn't reach you, because I didn't want to put pressure on her. And I always felt like it was meant to be, it'll happen, and be great to find out some stuff, but I knew that it was opening a Pandora's box for both of us. So,
and you got that reply?
I got a phone call from my intermediary to say, hi, Sarah, do you remember I said, I just got goosebumps. Do you remember I said I wouldn't contact you before 4 weeks unless I heard from her? And I said, yes. He said, well, she left me a message. And basically she got the letter. She had moved house. She'd gone back for the last time to collect some post and got the letter.
Oh, my gosh.
So actually, there's a chance she never would have got the second or third letter.
Oh, my word.
And he said she sounded very emotional, but very, excited. He said she sounds very young. And so we arranged a phone call fairly quickly after that. And then we exchanged letters and photos.
And how long were you in contact with each other via telephone and letters before you had face-to-face meeting?
So that was in the August. I would say it was late August we spoke on the phone for the first time, and then we met mid-October. I'd read a lot about honeymoon periods and rushing into it, and a bit like any relationship, if it starts too quickly and is too intense, it could end as quickly, and I was really conscious of that. And and Sue, my birth mum, was really sensitive and just really lovely about letting me guide the pace. Yeah. I felt, perhaps it was right for her as well. I've never actually asked her that. So yes, we met in the October. We'd exchanged photos and letters.
Yeah. And you've got brothers.
Yes. So I grew up with 2 brothers, and then I'd always hoped, there'll be a sister out there. I've always really cherished my girlfriends. And I thought, I bet there's a sister. No sister. And that was the funny thing at the Public Record Office. each time we found another boy. We're like, oh my God, how many boys did she have? And so 4 half brothers, and they're amazing. They were pretty shocked. They didn't know anything about me. So they were shocked, but delighted. I feel very lucky. And perhaps if there was a girl, it would have been more complicated.
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. So they didn't know anything about you until you contacted, or NORCAP contacted Sue, your birth mum.
And then Sue got them round the table and told them all in one go.
Yeah.
Because she always told them the same important stuff at the same time.
Yeah. Amazing. So you met Sue face to face for the first time in the autumn.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so you remember we drove. It was such a strange thing. It's like, what do you wear? You want to look like you, so you want to do your hair how you normally do it, but slightly nicer.
Mm.
And I do remember I wore a hair clip in my hair, and I remember a moment where I was taking my jumper off in front of her because I was quite hot, and the hair clip got caught in the jumper, and and actually it was quite bonding because she's a bit like that as well. So we drove, didn't we? And we picked somewhere in between where she lives and London and us. I don't know if I've ever been that nervous. I just don't know if I've ever felt that nervous.
I don't think I've ever felt that nervous before in my life.
No, it must have been strange for you to watch it. What were you feeling then?
I think I was feeling really excited for you, but obviously feeling really protective as a friend, and really nervous. Yeah, just like, bloody hell, I hope this goes well.
We talked about this kind of moment for the 10 years we'd been friends at that point.
Yeah.
Hadn't we? And I was, when I was young, I imagined she'd be on a horse. I'd grown out of that phase. But I was just so nervous because thinking we'd had really good phone conversations and they'd really flowed and we'd laughed a lot. She'd passed on a lovely message to my mum, and my mum passed on a lovely message to her. So it all felt very... and my brothers were okay about it, and so it all felt very neat, and I felt ready. But I was thinking, but I don't know, there's something about being on the phone, sitting opposite each other. And you're advised, go to a public place, have a coffee and a cake, or walk around a gallery, have stuff that can distract that you can talk about. I ignored, I didn't mean to, but inadvertently, I think we saw a Bella pasta, and we just went in there and ordered food, a starter and a main. It's absolutely not what you're supposed to do. Because you're just suddenly in a meal with someone. You know.
It's quite intense anyway, isn't it, having a meal with somebody that you don't know very well? Exactly.
The thing that did diffuse it was she was with her friend Nicola, and Nicola threw her arms around me first.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I was crying. And I was able to see Sue's face over Nicola's shoulder, and we sort of looked at each other, and it was very knowing look. It was lovely. It was actually the best thing Nicola could have done, but it was also very, very funny. And Sue was clutching a box of white chocolate Maltesers for me.
Oh, bless her.
But you went to the pub, didn't you, around the corner?
Yeah, we did. It felt really surreal, actually.
Yeah, that's the word I always use.
It felt really surreal. It felt like I was in a film.
Yeah.
It's not about me.
No, but you're so helpless, aren't you, in the pub? You can't help out.
No. And, we were like, oh, where have they gone? And part of me wanted to sort of follow you and hide behind lampposts, to make sure you're okay and peer through windows. But it was probably the most nerve-wracking an hour or however long you were there, I can't remember now, of my life. It was just like, oh God, looking at my watch, and they've been this long, and I hope it's going okay. And
because I think we thought it was you, Hayley and Matt in the pub. And I think we thought I'd be back in about an hour, and it was more like 2.
Yeah.
So I do remember you saying later, well, we knew that because it was longer, it was obviously going well. It
was going well. Yeah. But I mean, if you'd come back after 10 minutes, it'd be like, oh, right, okay.
I would have had a stiff drink of it.
Yeah.
But I think that it was the curiosity for you guys, I think, was driving you mad.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Desperately wanted to see her. Desperately wanted to see what she looked like. I mean, I was, in my mind's eye, she just looked like you, but older. And actually, she does.
And then at the end of we talked about all sorts of things. And one of the things we'd established on our phone calls really early on was that we are the kind of people who will trip over. We are the kind of people who, you put a jumper off and your hair slide gets caught and then someone has to come and help, Food will fall out of our mouths during a meal. I'm just going to love me for this. I'm painting a really lovely picture of her. But that being able to laugh at yourself thing was absolutely the biggest connection from the start.
Yeah.
And something I'd always assumed was a nurture thing from my dad, actually, because he was very funny and try not to take life too seriously, you know. And it was interesting to suddenly go, oh, this is a nature thing as well. But I remember after the meal, we came into the pub and I didn't have chance to tell you that she was with me. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I remember just sort of going, oh, there's Sarah. Oh, who else with her?
So it's like, Sue's, you know, half a metre behind me and I'm sort of gesticulating in front of myself. She's with me, she's with me. And you three, look, I mean, it's such a sweet moment because you know, Matt was driving, so obviously he was sober, but you two'd had a couple of drinks and were just, you know, sitting there going, oh my God, what's happening? And then you look so excited. That was kind of awkward, but lovely as well.
Yeah, it was.
Scary for her?
Oh, she must have been terrified.
Yeah. Do you want to come meet three of my best friends?
They're in the pub. They might be a bit drunk.
Yeah.
You saying your shared sort of traits that you have with Sue, and you really do. You do share lots of similar traits. It's amazing. It is amazing.
It is amazing. And I think there's definitely some looking for it. So at first, you know, she'd say she liked Diet Coke and I'd be like, oh my God, I like Diet Coke.
Yeah.
There's definitely some of that and it's quite exciting. And you've also, the biggest compliment to me growing up was that people said I looked like my dad. And, you know, got similar shaped eyes and I can see it, you know, and Sue has seen photographs, met him and seen photos of him and he looks like her dad, who was also called Garth. So sort of amazing stuff. But yeah, you do. My brothers are blonde and blue eyed and they're not now, but, you know, growing up, I was, you know, not like that. So it was amazing just going, oh, what do I look like? Oh, no, we haven't got the same nose, but we have got that and our chin and our, you know. And then meeting her sister probably 6 months or a year later, and seeing also a likeness in her, because when you grow up adopted, you can become a bit obsessed with who do I look like? Yeah. But yeah, the traits. I mean, we both are obsessed with hand and foot cream. I don't know if that's a genetic thing. I don't know if it can be, but we've decided it is.
And when you met the rest of the family, you mentioned meeting your aunt, when you met the boys, how was that?
Oh my gosh. So I just said, didn't I? I've never been so nervous. I think maybe I was 4% less nervous when I went to meet the boys. I knew their reaction had been positive. They had sadly had a few members of their family die over the previous 18 months. And so when Sue got the boys together to say, look, I need to tell you about Sarah, they thought another family member had died. And we joked and said I could be on the speakerphone in the corner. And then when they say, oh, has someone died? I go, no, I'm alive, you know, and we did it, but we decided not to do that. So they were excited, but obviously very intrigued. Yeah. And very nervous. And James, the oldest, was really, really nervous. So anyway, I remember you walked me to Balham Station and I got on the train and I was just so nervous all the way there. It was awful. Sue picked me up, she's nervous. And then we ended up in this situation where the 4 boys were sitting on a sofa and I was sitting on the sofa opposite them. And after a bit, I did say, could someone come and sit next to me? Because it feels like I'm in a really terrifying interview. Yeah. And James made me a cup of tea and passed it to me and he was shaking and the tea was like, it didn't spill, but it was shaking and I held and I was shaking, you know, it was very emotional. It was very, surreal is the word though. I didn't have lots of moments where I was crying and overwhelmed with emotion because it was just too surreal. I can't really explain it. And then I met Lindsay, Sue's sister, my aunt, and that was really special because Lindsay will have been, I think she's 3 years younger. So she'd been about 14 when Sue had me. And they talked about it forever. In fact, Sue hadn't told many people at all in her life and had always hoped that I'd get in touch, but kind of had developed a mechanism to cope with the fact that I might not. Of course. So for Lindsay, it was really, it was emotional. And there was the woman who I wanted a sister, but suddenly there was, and, you know, Sue is 17 years older than me. and Lindsay's 14, 15 years older. So, it's not that far away in age, really.
No, it isn't at all. And you've continued to have a really lovely, close relationship with each other, haven't you?
Yeah, so we had that meeting where you were there in October 2003. So I feel it took a while to not feel nervous when I was visiting, and actually meeting the boys' girlfriends or meeting their friends. I sort of felt like I was stared at a bit. Always, people always kind and welcoming. I have to say, my experience has been really, really positive. And I, as you know, became an intermediary for nearly 10 years for NORCAP, a few years after tracing Sue. And it's not always that experience. It's not always positive.
No.
But most people who search, even if it's not a positive experience, don't regret it.
Yeah.
And more women tend to search, often when they've had children. And often men do it later, perhaps when their adoptive mother or father's died.
Yeah.
Because there's a guilt, you do feel this guilt. You feel like you're being ungrateful that you're searching. And that's why I have always been grateful that my mum always understood it. She said, I know I'd want to do it. I get it,
And do you think if your mum wasn't so open to you searching for your birth mum, that you wouldn't have done it?
I think it's been a really difficult thing to do. I think it would have been a really difficult thing. When I told my brothers I was going to do it, they both expressed feeling weird about it. And I said, look, you're my brothers. You came into the world, I was there. I've slammed my bedroom door in your faces. We've had all those experiences growing up. So you can't replace that. If you meet as adults, you have missed that time. But it's okay, and I just feel extremely lucky, actually.
It is a lovely story. And Sue sent you, I remember this actually. Sue sent you an amazing parcel, didn't she?
She did. So we'd met up in that October, and then my birthday's 3 days before Christmas Day. And actually, after we'd been in touch, I did ask her if Christmas felt a bit easier, because I suddenly realised, actually, the 22nd of December, it must be such a tough day for her. And she said, of course it is. So for my birthday, she sent me 28 presents for every birthday she'd missed.
That was amazing.
You cried.
I did, yeah.
The whole time I opened it.
As soon as you pulled out another, I've got tears in my eyes now talking about it. As soon as you pulled out another present and unwrapping it, I was like, there's another one.
No, but that's another moment where I felt huge emotion, but just also surreal. I think also you cried for me quite a lot.
I think I did.
Sometimes easier though, isn't it? Actually, because there's something about that. And I found that even experiencing grief, that if someone else is really upset, it's a huge comfort to you. And it sort of allows you, I can't explain it, allows you to not have to tap into it so much.
I know what you mean, because sometimes when you feel that level of emotion, you feel like if you open the floodgates that you might never stop. Yeah. And that's quite hard. Like you can't control it. So if somebody else is doing it for you, it feels a little bit more controllable. So I can totally understand where you're coming from there.
And also, I didn't know what the tears would be, because it wasn't sadness.
No.
I've got this new brilliant relationship. And I've got new, the boys felt like cousins really quick, early days. They felt like cousins. I can't explain it. It was like, oh yeah, they definitely feel like relatives. My relationship with my mum didn't change. My relationship with my brothers didn't change. My relationship with my friends didn't change. So it has a huge impact, but it's a part of you. It's not all of you. I was scared to do it. I think people are reluctant to do it sometimes because they think everything's going to change, but it doesn't. It's just...
I guess it does and it doesn't in a certain extent. Everything changes because now you know part of you that you didn't know before.
You can ask questions.
So, but like you said, your relationship with your family hasn't changed.
No, exactly.
That's lovely. It's such a brilliant story, and I feel so honoured to and privileged to have gone through part of it with you.
Oh, I feel well. Thank you for supporting me through it. I couldn't have done it without you.
Oh no, it was amazing. It was amazing, and it is.
And other Hayley.
And other Hayley and Matt, of course. Yeah. And I think it's really inspiring if anybody's listening to this and they feel like they want to search for their birth family, I think that you've got a good, inspiring story to tell, and it might encourage them to take that first step. Have you got any advice for anybody that is listening that maybe is considering this?
Yeah, I think I always tell people I'm adopted and that I've searched, because it's a bit like any community, anytime you meet people who experience the same things, you suddenly, all these people come out the woodwork, and I've met people for coffee through other friends just to talk about it. And I think the thing I always say is be absolutely sure the reasons why you're doing it. Be as sure as you can possibly be, that if you don't like what you find out, if you don't get to find out the answers that you were looking for, that you're going to be able to find a way of coping with that. And then if you do get in touch and it's positive, just take time. Just take the time with it. And I sort of instinctively knew that, and I was given that advice, but I knew that. And then the 10 years of volunteering as an intermediary just confirmed that every single time. Any case I had where people wanted to meet straight away or booked a weekend away, and you can't tell people what to do, and they're bound to have an amazing weekend away, but it's important to take your time for everybody else in your life as well as you two.
Yeah.
Because, if your mum suddenly said she'd relinquished a child at age 15, 16 or something, and she went away with that person, it would be bizarre for you. But if you said we're going to meet for coffee, you'd be intrigued and you'd be excited, and you'd be able to, everyone in your life needs to process it. So I think just taking time and being careful with people's feelings and looking after yourself, I think.
After your own, yeah. Now, you mentioned that NORCAP isn't around anymore. What other bodies are there that people could turn to get help and advice on searching for their birth parents?
I think now the thing to do is go to the social services where you were adopted. So you find out you apply for your birth certificate, original birth certificate. And then I think what you have to do is go to the social service where your file will be kept, and you go from there.
And you trace it from there. Yeah, I'll find some links and put them up. I know there's Adoption UK. Yes. That is a charity that could definitely set people on the right path or give them valid advice.
The thing that happened, Hayley, sorry to interrupt, the thing that's happened is that people are doing it more and more via Facebook and social media, and, I wouldn't advise that.
No.
The thing about having an intermediary is you've just got that person to say, well, what did they sound like? Did they sound okay? Then, and then that person will report back to you, well, they're a bit nervous because of this and this, or, things like they've just lost their job, they're feeling fragile and vulnerable, it might be better to wait till this, just all sorts of stuff that can go on. Once you've sent a message to someone on Facebook, there's nowhere really to go.
No, there isn't. And also, I think the good thing about having an intermediary is that there's safeguarding there.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got a buffer, and you don't have that if you just do it all through Facebook and social media. They're safeguarding you, and they're safeguarding your birth family. So I think definitely getting a body involved.
Yeah. And also if someone, if you're in your 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, the first birth mothers I ever contacted on behalf of her son was 86 or something. She had long given up any hope that he would ever get in touch. And there wasn't that much time because she was 86. So, we didn't want to leave it for years or anything, but she needed time to process it and just exchange a letter. She also didn't have the vocabulary of how to explain how he was conceived, because to you and me, it'd be a one-night stand, but somebody in their 80s, 15 years ago, didn't have that vocabulary. No. Might not. So there's also just, if he had contacted her direct and said, so who was my birth dad and how did it all happen? She would have just probably frozen, probably opted out of the whole thing. So yeah, I would always advise getting a mediator or an intermediary to help.
And also they're trained as well. They've been trained within this field. So they know the right things to say and they know the right way to handle a situation.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be positive stories about people who contacted direct. I have no doubt. And I think that's incredibly lucky, but that would be my advice.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. And as we said, we will put some resources in the show notes at the end of this podcast. Thank you, Sarah. I've loved recounting that story.
it's lovely.
It was such an amazing time in my life, and obviously very important in your life. But it is a story that that is still so fresh in my mind and stays with me. And like I said, I feel so privileged that I could have gone down that journey with you.
Thanks, Hayley. Well, it's lovely that you were there, because it means that I know I didn't make it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can verify that it happened. You didn't just imagine it.
Right.
And she didn't arrive on a horse, though. I'm sorry.
No, it's a shame. I must talk to her about that.
Maybe she can get a horse. Maybe for your next birthday.
Not too late. It's never too late.
Not too late. Never too late. That was Sarah Nicholson talking about her adoption story. And huge thanks to Sarah for sharing such a personal story with us. And what did you all think, guys?
Well, I was just blown away, because I wasn't expecting to be so moved by a story that doesn't directly affect me, and I have no connection with it. I'm not adopted, and I know both of my birth parents, one of which unfortunately, but just listening to her and the raw emotion in her voice, and understanding the process as well, because it's not something that we experience or get to experience vicariously, I suppose. It was absolutely fascinating, and I loved the whole thing from beginning to end.
It was so funny, but also incredibly responsible, because she had such a, I think she explained it so well, such a neat experience leading up to meet her mother. But she was very honest about how lucky she was compared to so many other adoption stories. And there is that honeymoon period, but then it can all go a bit tits up. So I loved her honesty, but I loved how wonderful her story was. I mean, it was just so positive, and she told it so beautifully as well. So funny. I mean, I love your relationship anyway, but it was just... Oh, I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I'm glowing from it.
And incredible that you could be there with her, Hayley.
Yes, so lovely.
That is such an invaluable such a thing to have in a friendship.
Such a privilege. And you're right, actually, Stephen. It's not something that you would ever consider if you don't have, if you're not adopted or you don't know somebody adopted. It's not a process that you would ever go, oh, I wonder how you would go about that. So it's really insightful listening to Sarah's story about all the steps that you have to go through if you're going to search for a birth parent.
I think I have a very, very sort of tenuous link to that process, looking for and why she did it. Because my paternal grandfather left before. I don't know if my dad had been born or when he was a very young infant, so we never had a relationship with that side of the family. And in my family, everybody looks like somebody that they know apart from me. I take my looks from my paternal grandfather's side of the family. And so I was always interested. And so when the opportunity came up a couple of years ago, with the advent of Facebook and all these modern social media sites, I found my family, and it was the most fascinating experience, because you uncover all these answers to questions that you've always had as a child. And so for Sarah, it must have been just, I think I took a relief from it. There was sort of this weight off my shoulders, as if to say, now I know the answers, I can carry on living, I suppose, or move on to the next thing in my life.
Well, I think the questions will always be there, won't they? Unless you find the answers, of course. Yeah, exactly. But it was an incredible process, and she was so brave. I don't know of a better word, actually, throughout the whole process. Like she said, I cried enough for both of us, and it was almost like all of the emotional release came through me. Well, not just through me, through our other friends as well.
But she did have such an upbeat attitude about it throughout, even when she opened her 28 presents and you were in pieces.
I was literally
that ruined me.
On the floor. I was gone. Every time she pulled out another one from the box, I was like, oh my God, there's another
She was like,
one.
I just saw it as a really lovely thing, and I was getting 28 presents.
And I was gone.
That is so lovely.
I think I cried for 28 days.
Oh.
That's very biblical, Hayley.
That's me.
my favourite TV show, or one of them, is Long Lost Family, and I watch it with my mum, and I don't have any sort of relationship to adoption. I don't know anyone that I know of that is adopted or what have you. So watching this programme, Long Lost Family, on TV, it's basically her story. And loads of different sort of adoption stories, and we sit there in tears every time it's on. My mum and I watch it every time, and it's just so beautiful watching those relationships come together and seeing them from when they started and when they started looking for the other person, and it's just such a beautiful. Sarah's story was just incredible.
I was going to say it is really incredible, and it was so lovely seeing being there right at the sort of beginning of Sarah and Sue's relationship, and their relationship now. They've got such a beautiful relationship. Sue is such a wonderful lady, and they look so similar.
And love hand cream.
Oh,
they both love. They've both got all these little sort of quirks which are really similar.
It's brilliant.
Similar sense of humour. Yeah, just those things that you, I guess you just take for granted.
It's interesting what you say, Natalie, about not knowing anyone with a story, an adoption story. I didn't really. As you may or may not know, Natalie is a lot younger than two of us. So I mean,
a lot younger. Sorry, I don't know if the listeners heard that. It's quite the substantial
considerable amount. Considerable amount. It gives you a
double
broad
figures
to cater for every demographic. But sorry, I've lost my train of thought now, thinking how young Natalie is. That always sets me off.
guys, I'm 28. I'm not that young.
Well, you're a generation younger.
No,
Yes.
we're
us.
only 35, Meredith.
Oh,
Be
Yeah,
quiet.
exactly.
That's right.
yeah, plus
Plus the 10
VAT.
years. Plus VAT.
There was always possibly one or two kids at school that were adopted, or there were rumours they were adopted. So aside from sort of Annie, I exactly that didn't really know much about adoption and didn't really think much about adoption. And then around your age, Natalie, and the age Sarah said she felt I should do it now because if I wait till I'm 40 it'll be too late. A lot of people then were beginning to sort of come forward, and more of my friends actually have sort of shared an adoption story, and I've got quite a few friends who have adopted children after years of IVF, or because they've wanted to adopt rather than have a biological child. And so I do think as you get older, adoption becomes a lot more within your sort of life. You do hear a lot more. I don't know, maybe that is just in my case, but around the sort of age of 30, people were saying, do you know what, my dad wasn't my real dad and I'm going to look for my dad. Or there was a lot more of that going on. And certainly with Facebook, it has given you so many opportunities to look for family and long lost friends.
I think what's important now is that we have to look back. So I'm going to assume, Hayley, that Sarah's exactly your age, isn't she?
Yeah.
So around the time that she was born, the stigma around an unmarried teenage mother was so shocking and horrifying that she would perhaps have been forced into adopting Sarah, and it being the only option. And even to this day, it's still sometimes is the best thing to do. If you choose to keep the child, sometimes it is the better thing to do. But I think we're going to see less and less of this sort of reasons why people are adopted, unknown reasons why people were adopted, or people were adopted because they would have been born into a family of shame, or that it wouldn't have been right. So with the advent of teaching kids in school about protection and how to stay safe when having sex, I think numbers like this are dropping. I think it was sad that Sarah's mum did feel that she had to adopt her, but at the same time it ended so beautifully. And I love that. And I'm not saying she was lucky. I mean, yes, I suppose you could say she was lucky because, like she said, it could have gone totally the opposite way.
Absolutely. I mean, Sarah didn't know how it was going to go, and I just think you just have to prepare yourself for every outcome. And when she was looking for her mum and then found her, it's like, okay, well, it's almost like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because she might not respond to the letter, or she might not be what I expected. So there's always that constant just keeping your emotions in check. And I think you have to do that. It's a self-preservation, isn't it? Just in case, just in case, just in case. You just have to prepare yourself.
Yeah, I can't imagine. The only fear I can relate it to is it's similar to a coming out story. It's that fear, that crushing fear that you might be rejected. And it's a horrible fear, but something pushes you through that barrier and says, I have to know either way. And I actually do have another sort of friend who went through the same process, and it wasn't as positive. It was just his mum had to give him up for adoption because she wasn't mentally stable, and so it was a sad story in that he didn't get the sort of the Cilla Black reunion, we'll call it.
Yeah.
We remember those sorts of reunions where families were adopted and sent off to Australia and brought back together years later. It wasn't like that. It was a bit sadder, but he said he was still happy he did it because
well, you're just putting that piece of the jigsaw in its place, aren't you? And
it's the truth. And I think it's
it
it's
is
not
the
about
truth,
lying.
but it's also, you learn so much about yourself. My father was an absent father. He really wasn't around. I mean, my mum sort of tried, but there really were a handful of occasions that I met him, and then he moved away when I was 17 to another country. And I only really knew of him from anecdotes from my mum, and she sort of spoke about him in quite high regard. Didn't really sort of know too much about him, and sort of couldn't identify with him, certainly. And then I remember going out to visit him a couple of times in Italy and seeing bits of myself that I really sort of didn't like, which now really annoy me. And so it does awaken. You do. I think sometimes meeting a parent that actually might not be all you hoped they would be, or a disappointment, or not a nice person. I'm not saying that, and that's about my dad or anything like that, but that those are all things that could potentially happen. And then that leads you to questions at a later stage in your life. Growing up with odd, weird parents and things like that, you sort of either survive or have therapy or, whatever. We all know that a damaging parent is very, very damaging. But it would. I think it would open a new avenue or a door into your life, really.
I think that's why people put it off for so long, isn't it? Because it's the fear of the unknown, and the fear
but the truth of knowing yourself as well.
Yeah.
What I had never thought about, actually, and Sarah mentioned it, was because Sarah, of course, worked for, as she mentioned, she worked for NORCAP for a number of years after the process, to help other people that were also searching for their birth family, is that to consider the children of the birth parent. And she says, for example, if I had given up a child in my teenage years and then they found me and I have my two daughters, not to forget those two daughters and go off in this
Thelma and Louise-esque holiday.
Yeah, with this lost child, that you had given up, and that was something that I'd never considered before. That it must be really confusing and a difficult emotions to negotiate if a child that your parent has given up has found your parent again,
and if you didn't know. And you see your mother in a whole new light as well at a later stage in your life.
This is what I loved about Sarah's story, and Sarah in particular. I think perhaps her time at NORCAP has given her this insight, is that she was very aware and very conscious of everybody else involved in this process, because it's not her as an adopted child, it is her with adoptive parents, a mother, siblings, half-siblings. Everybody involved in this process is going to see this from a different point of view. And she was respectful of that. And that's what I thought was so great.
Sarah didn't work for NORCAP until after she found her birth mother. So that was nothing to do with her training at NORCAP. That is just testament to how much of an incredible person Sarah is. And if you ever meet her, you'll know how truly brilliant she is, because she's so sensitive of how, and she was so sensitive of how everybody would be feeling, you know, from her brothers to her mum to her birth mum to her half brothers, just everybody in the process.
Yeah, and she says it was neat, but I think that was down to her and the way she handled it from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were, and Sue was pretty good as well. I think they were all very respectful of each other, all of them in the process, and I think that's what you have to be, just very mindful and very respectful of each other. And it wasn't solely about one person, wasn't solely about Sarah, or wasn't solely about Sue. They knew that this was a bigger picture. There were lots of people that this was going to affect, and as Sarah said, we were going to open a can of worms, a Pandora's box for all of us. And I think that's it. I think that the acknowledgement and being respectful of that.
I think what we could also do is take, I don't know, be more Sarah, just not necessarily with the big decisions in life.
Should we get some T-shirts printed
Definitely.
up? Yeah, Sarah. I think we
not
should.
Not just with the big stuff like this, but in any situation, is to stop and just have a quick pause and reflection and think about the consequences of actions, because she knew that this would cause upset, but she knew that also it was worth doing. But at the same time, she tried really carefully. She took advice where it was given to her, you know, by not throwing herself in and overdoing it. At the same time, she was conscious of that. But I would always remember being asked. I was doing a podcast. I cheated on you, ladies, years ago. It was about coming out. It was a coming out podcast, and they wanted my advice. And they asked me, the presenter, a friend of mine, Johnny, said, "What advice would you give to a young person who wants to come out?" And I said, actually, I've got no advice for a young person who wants to come out, because essentially it's down to them to do it. My advice would be given to somebody receiving that news. And you know, and considering the impact of your response for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that will be their forever lasting memory of, you know, of them coming out. And I think the same could be said in these situations like this: is be considerate to everybody else that is going to be involved, and be more Sarah.
But definitely be more Sarah. But Sarah also recognised when she was 14, she thought 17 was really old. But then when she was 17, she was like, oh, I get it. I absolutely get it. There are going to be some children looking for their birth parents that don't get it and are angry and do want lots and lots of answers. And I wonder what, you know, I mean, that must happen as well. And that must be so difficult and totally understandable. But, you know, there must be situations where adopted children turn up on doorsteps, and I mean, do you think that still happens if they've done it privately? I know through the organisation, and you said, Hayley, this is why using a body is so important to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, unfortunately, NORCAP is no longer around, but there are other bodies that you can go through, and we'll definitely put those in the show notes. But yes, I think it is really important to, I mean, Sarah did mention about people going through Facebook, and as you did, Stephen, and yes, there are lots of success stories, but also just to be mindful that when you do go through Facebook, there isn't a mediator, there isn't a buffer. You're just sort of, you know, plunging right in the deep end. And what Sarah mentioned at one point, which I found really interesting, was that some people searching for their birth mum, when they find them, their birth mum, I mean, maybe not now in our generation, but maybe generations before, may not have the vocabulary to tell them why they gave up the child. Like, for example, if it was a one-night stand, they may not be able to tell that to their child. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
That lady at the end, the octogenarian who didn't have the vocabulary to say,
yes, exactly.
she had a one-night stand with a bloke and it didn't work out, because she felt there was that shame, whereas now we just think, oh, that's another Friday.
Yeah.
But for her, 60-odd years ago,
the shame that would come with that would just be crushing.
Hayley, I wanted to ask you, as from your perspective, what was it like being Sarah's best friend, not just in the lead up to her meeting her birth mum, but following that? Did you sort of, were you there for, I suppose you were there for her during that process of her getting to know each other?
Yeah, so I was there when she went down to meet Sue for the first time, and that was so nerve-wracking. I mean, I'm sweating just thinking about it now.
Like a film.
Yeah, Sarah was just so calm. It's like, again, all of the sort of anxiety, I think, was coming through me. And then we went back down to see Sue on her birthday a little while later, and that was also really super special, and it was so lovely because she'd had her meetings with a couple of meetings with Sue. The ice had been broken with the family, so it was a lovely celebration. Actually, I remember Sue giving me a big hug and saying, "Oh, it's so right that you're here because you were here right from the very beginning." I don't know why I'm just getting really emotional saying that, but it was so beautiful. And it was just I was so honoured to be part of the whole process.
Yeah.
Do you know what they said on the first time on the phone? Because obviously they phoned each other first. And what do you say? Hi.
I know.
I'm your daughter. I'm your. It's like, what do you say?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know whether I've ever asked her, or maybe I can't remember. I don't know. But it's
very private.
It's very private. It's very private, and that's going to be a big conversation, isn't it?
I imagine that she probably doesn't fully remember.
No,
that
it's
conversation.
such a whirlwind. Yeah.
Well, no, you don't, because when you are so. Well, I mean, we've all experienced nerves beyond belief, but when I often get asked, how did you tell your mum? I think, absolutely no idea. Couldn't honestly tell you. Don't remember it. I know that I started.
You don't remember at all?
None whatsoever, because I've never felt fear like it in my life, and so it's an utter blank between. I do remember hanging my head in shame, which I'm annoyed at myself for. But I hung my head. I said something, and then it was over. And I wish I could remember, but I imagine for Sarah it was the most. I can hear the ringing in her ears and the what is going to happen in the next 20 seconds.
Yeah.
My entire 28 years on this planet could be, thrown away, or I could start a new life. I really tried so hard, and Sarah did such a wonderful job of taking us on that sort of process that she went through and sort of explaining it in such, in an articulate way with such great detail.
Eloquent.
And I could feel that not just the nerves, but the joy and the pleasure and the anticipation and all the stuff that you just don't think about that goes along with
despite her not arriving on a horse.
Yeah.
She didn't arrive on a horse. I mean, Sue, if you're listening, we need to get this
We need to get Sue a horse.
I was going to say 28 gifts was lovely, but we need a horse.
Yeah.
I've got a vision in my mind of Sue, and was it Ryder Cock? What was it? The bells on her fingers and bells on her toes. Ryder Cock horse to Banbury Cross. That's how I imagine Sue. That's how I imagine Sarah. On a white
dress
horse.
with long hair with plaits in it.
Yes,
we can make that happen.
That's how I imagine Sarah envisioned Sue.
Oh, and they've got such a special relationship. They're what a pair of beautiful ladies. Amazing. So happy for them both.
It was a cracking interview, Hayley. Well done. Absolutely
thank
brilliant.
you. I'm really glad you enjoyed it, and huge super thanks to Sarah for sharing her story, as you said, Stephen, so eloquently, and I'm glad you all enjoyed it, and a big thanks to Sue as well for letting us talk about your journey too.
Thank you so much, Hayley and Sarah.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure, and we will get those t-shirts. #BeMoreSarah.
I think so.
I love that.
So it's goodbye from the birds until next week. See you later. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
For calling birds.
I really want to do my impression of a peacock.
God.
Go on then.
Go on.
Oh my God.
Gosh.
Max would go
okay.
nuts if he heard that.
Oh.
Can I do my chicken?
Yeah.
That's a bird.
Yeah.
Go on then.
Oh my God, that end bit, yeah.
Good.
Meredith, what can you do? Can you do an animal?
What bird?
What bird?
Well, I saw in Amelia's stories that she can do that monkey one. I didn't realise, but she's at university doing it for people on her stories.
What? Monkey bird?
She makes that noise. Bird. Oh God, can I do a duck? Hang on. No.
Yeah.
Is that a duck?
I thought a duck was...
Yeah,
that was a good one.
That's Donald Duck.
That was
Do it
me
again.
again. Sorry.
Oh.
Oh my God, you're a proper...
I am quite avian.
Is that to
Right?
entice people into the bushes?
It's a gay thing.
Oh my God.
You know, we
your
have our
bird?
animalistic tribe, like wolves
do you
and
know
bears.
what?
Classic
We also have
Stephen.
birds.
We should... Hayley actually said to me today, we were talking about birds, and I said, well, Stephen thinks I'm like a flamingo anyway, because I'm just sort of very
A
unstable.
batty flamingo with thick glasses on.
Tiny brain.
Those long legs.
Yeah.
And Hayley, what did you...
Constantly looking for something on the ground.
Yeah, which is on my head.
Yeah.
But Hayley, what did you say today?
I said I would be more like an emperor penguin with my big boobs waddling around all top heavy.
Do you know what they sound like?
No.
Oh my God, are you an ornithologist? I fucking hate birds. I fucking hate
Is that
them.
what they sound like?
Probably. Something like that.
I saw penguins in South Africa and they really stank.
I love a penguin.
Yeah,
though.
they
I do love a
do.
penguin. What would you be, Natalie? A graceful swan.
A chicken.
No, I think you would be a swan or something. You'd
Yeah,
be
a
something
swan.
really graceful.
No, we had a gold crest outside our window the other day, and it was like this crazy little thing, really determined to sort of get in, but didn't really want to get in, and it had the most amazing yellow Mohican. I'm not saying that you have any of those traits, but it was so cute. I was like, that's a cool bird. I'm not normally a bird fan, but I was like, that bird is a goldfinch is
I've
pretty
just
cool.
remembered a song, a musical theatre song. It goes, Goldfinch and linnet bird, nightingale, blackbird, teach me how to sing. And names all the birds.
So beautiful.
So heavenly.
I know. I'd like you to come and just sing into my ear very quietly before I go to sleep.
I
every
think
night.
you'd be a nightingale based on that.
Maybe a nightingale, yeah. Or a
Yeah.
hummingbird.
I would be a peacock.
Yeah,
just
well,
because
yeah,
I am
definitely.
a fucking big show off. And I don't think anybody else screech.
What? You are?
And I do wear outfit. You should see me at Pride. I look like a peacock.
We should
I've
see
been
you
referred
after
to
Pride.
as a peacocking man-child before.
I
And
love
then
it.
12 hours later, you sort of resemble, one might say, a chicken.
A dead, fat,
Plucked chicken.
gin-soaked
I was going to say a roasted one in a Chinese takeaway, but
hanging in the window. I also have to say this, Meredith. Meredith will know that when I leave her voice notes during the day, I often refer to the pigeons on the roof opposite.
fuck off, pigeon.
That's my say. Fuck off, pigeon, because I occasionally just screech it whilst on a voice note. They're there now, Meredith, fucking on the roof. Dirty little bastards. I spend all day shouting because they just keep constantly having sex on the roofs opposite. It's like, have a bit of dignity.
We don't need more pigeons.
We've got a couple of tits that do that.
You know what I saw on my walk?
pair of great tits.
Yeah.
There's one right here in front of me. I saw, for the first time in my life, in real life, I saw a black swan.
Oh, where?
Down the road.
No. Wasn't it just not dirty? Because it was it?
Because it's from East London.
It was an urban swan, and it
It was
had
a
to fuck you up.
Wolfenstein squad.
No, it's a beautiful. I'm going to put a picture on socials. It was like it had a red head and a red beak. It looked like it had red lipstick on and a beautiful black, fluffy, frilly dress on. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Were
just
you
in the
drunk?
forest.
Yeah, were
I'm just
you
asking.
tripping?
I'm not accusing. I'm just saying. At the time, were you drinking?
I wasn't. No, I was on a
Right,
walk
okay.
with my children.
Oh, well, that means nothing.
Something, yeah.
I didn't. Yeah, and
I was waiting for somebody to say that.
No, I'm terrified of birds. I actually have a bird phobia, which Jeremy finds hysterical because he's really into birds. So much so, he was a member of the RSPB and once submitted an entry to be a calendar star, totally naked with a pair of binoculars in front of his car.
how's that application
Classic
going?
Jeremy.
Just out of interest.
I don't think he heard back.
If he wants to take it further, yes. I am willing. I have a camera somewhere.
If you or anyone you know has been affected by any of the subject matter we've covered in this week's podcast, please see the show notes for details of places you can find help, support and advice.
Thank you for listening to For Calling Birds. Don't forget that you can follow us on Instagram at forcallingbirds_podcast. You can tweet us at birds_calling or find us on Facebook.